All right, guys, so here we are looking at lesson 3-1, and we are getting in this unit into what is called factoring. So for today's lesson, we are going to be factoring out a GCF, and GCF stands for greatest common factor. For your essential question, you need to explain the process of factoring out a GCF. So for our vocab, the first term is a prime number. And prime numbers are numbers that are only divisible by 1 and itself. So our first prime number is the number 2, because 2 is only divisible by 1 and 2. Our next prime number is 3, because 3 is only divisible by 1 and 3. Our next prime number is 5, because 5 is only divisible by 1 and 5. From there we have 7, 11, 13, and on and on. Now, the numbers that we will use most commonly are the numbers 2, 3, and 5. Occasionally, I might throw in a question with the number 7, but the higher our prime numbers get, the higher our numbers that we're working with get, and I try not to dive into huge numbers while we're working with our prime numbers, or what we're going to see today. Factors are whole numbers multiplied together to produce another number. So, for example, the factors of the number 6 are 2 and 3, because 2 and 3 equals 6, or 2 times 3 equals 6. The factors of 9 are 3 and 3, because 3 times 3 equals 9. Now, other factors of 6 could be 1 and 6, and other factors of 9 could be 1 and 9. But we're going to look at something today called prime factorization, and this is probably something that you have seen in math years and years ago, but we're going to kind of bring it back and we're going to add a little spin on it. So prime factorization is breaking a number down into the set of prime numbers. So we're going to take a number and we're going to break it down so it's a product of just these numbers that we listed up here under the prime numbers. So we're going to be using these numbers again later on in our notes. GCF, that's our greatest common factor. And this is the highest number and variable, because we will be looking at polynomials, that divides exactly into 2 or more numbers. And our last term is factoring. And factoring is rewriting a polynomial as the product of its factors. So before we get to our GPs, I do want to look at an explore problem and kind of relate it to what we're going to see today. So first, we have the expressions 5x times 4x plus 3, and we need to multiply this. Now, we've learned over the years that when you have a number directly in front of your parentheses, we have to distribute that into the parentheses. And distribution is a multiplication property. So when we distribute, we are multiplying our numbers. So when we distribute 5x into the parentheses, again, we multiply it to everything inside of the parentheses. So 5x times 4x gives us 20x to the second power, or 20x squared. Remember that x times x gives us x squared. And 5 times 3 gives us 15, and we have that x there. So 5x times 3 gives us 15x. Over here, same thing, only now we have that trinomial inside of the parentheses. So we have to distribute that 9x to all 3 terms inside of the parentheses. So 9x times 4x squared. Well, 9 times 4 gives us 36, and x times x squared gives us x to the third power, or x cubed. 9x times negative 7x gives us a negative 63x squared. Because again, x times x gives us x squared. And 9x times a positive 5 is going to give us a positive 45x. Now, if I'm multiplying something with an x in it, my number that I get when I multiply has to have at least an x in it. If we are multiplying it to something else with an x in it, then that exponent is going to increase as we multiply. And remember, when we multiply, we add the exponents. So over here on the 9x, that's 9x to the first power. So when I multiply this to the x squared, I add the 1 and the 2, and that gives me a 3. For the second one, when I multiply x times x, we add the 1s, and that gives us an exponent of 2. So that is what happens when we multiply our variables together. Now, what I want to touch on before we get to our GPs today is that these are the polynomials we get when we have distributed. Or expanded or put them in standard form. These polynomials that we have here are what we call factored form. And if you go back to the vocab term that I just talked about on the previous slide, I said that factoring is rewriting a polynomial as the product of its factors. And so over here, this polynomial's factors are 5x and 4x plus 3, because those are the two polynomials we multiply to get this polynomial. For the second one here, the factors of this polynomial are 9x and 4x squared minus 7x plus 5, because again, those are the two polynomials, the two factors that we multiply together to get this larger polynomial. So when we are asked to write a polynomial in factored form, what we are doing is looking for, again, those numbers that we multiply together, those polynomials that we multiply together to get the larger polynomial.